Hi, today I'll be presenting a research paper based on the work of MetaPix, which is a method of few-shot video retargeting. First, we can answer the question of what video retargeting is. Video retargeting is a process that aims to transfer human movement from a source video to a person in a target video. In these two examples, we have two source videos. On the left, you have a source video of a cartoon character from Fortnite. On the right, you have a source video of an anime dancing character. These two source videos are retargeted onto a picture of Donald Trump where he exhibits the same human dance moves as the source videos. One current work of video retargeting is from the paper of Everybody Dance Now, where movement is transferred from a source video to a target. One of the main problems we want to improve upon is the target requirement. This method requires a 20-minute video of the target in a fixed location. So in order to get this retargeted video of target 1 and target 2, these two targets had to record themselves for 20 minutes in a lab or like fixed environment. This brings us to the main objective of MetaPix. MetaPix aims to improve the requirements of the target by lessening the number of samples needed from the target. This can be framed as a few-shot learning problem, hence few-shot video retargeting. So basically, given some driver video and only a few pictures of the target, MetaPix creates some approach that results in a retargeted video. Being able to do this will allow retargeting to any random person without having to record them in a controlled environment. You'd also be able to use random images from the web for retargeting. So there are two related approaches to video retargeting that MetaPix method takes inspiration from. The first is post to image, where the input is a rendering of body joints and the output is an RGB image. So on the right here you have rendering of body joints, and on the left is the RGB image of a real human being in the same pose as here. This method creates a mapping by detecting poses in video frames and then learns to generate images of the target subject from the pose. The second method is pose transfer, which takes an input image along with the desired pose and automatically synthesizes a new image depicting the person in that pose. So given a target pose, you have this source image of a golfer. You want this golfer in this pose, and you get this synthesized image. And pose transfer retains the person's appearance and as well as the background textures. The main problem with these two approaches, as mentioned before, for pose to image is this requires 20 minutes of video in a fixed location. And for pose transfer, you also require a couple minutes of video, and it uses the first 85% of the video, which is a few thousand frames of data. So before we can understand how MetaPix quickly and efficiently retargets a source video to a target video, we need to understand Pix-to-Pix HD, which is a subcomponent that we'll be using for MetaPix. Pix-to-Pix is a generative adversarial network framework that allows for image to image translation. So for example, this picture on the left, we have a generated image of a city with cars, trees, and buildings. This image was generated from an input image where it's a lot more simple and not as detailed. And the same is happening on the right, where we're given two simple images where you have a simple face and a simple drawing of a cat. Basically the Pix2Pix will generate a realistic looking image of a face and cat. Now you have post warp, which is used by post transfer, and this basically can leverage learning to move pixels instead of having to generate color and background images from a learned representation. So we can see the background here is generated from this picture, and the tennis player isn't here anymore. The golfer here isn't there, which means the background has to be generated, and the same for this image. So now we can talk about the solution to reducing the data requirement, which is meta-learning. So the previous two approaches train a person-specific model, but MetaPix aims to create a generic model by using a new meta-learning algorithm called Reptile. This generic model is optimized for personalization to a new target person, given only K samples for T iterations. So if we look in this image, we have a model that uses the Pix2Pix framework. It generalizes a model, and from that model we give it K samples so that it can create a personalization of the generic model. So we have this guy in a blue hat and a red shirt and another blue hat, and these all represent three different sets of K samples. So now, how do we reduce the data requirement? So our goal is to retarget a source video to a target quickly and efficiently. Quickly is defined as running a few iterations of T, where T is the number of iterations. Efficiently is defined as given a few frames, where K is the number of frames. MetaPix optimizes the base retargeting architecture by optimizing it for a few shot and fast adaptation for personalization. And personalization is defined as fine-tuning the generic model on a specific set of target frames. So for the MetaPix personalization, we see that these frames are trained on image to pose for T epochs, and you have the source video here, and these are matched to the target frames, which is a personalization of this generic model. So now we can talk about the algorithm that is used for pose to image and post transfer. So the first thing we do is train on pose image pairs. These images on the left represent the pose, and on the right they represent the image. So these are the pose image pairs. We use pre-trained weights which are trained on pose image pairs, and they learned a pre-trained theta from all of these pairs. So we take the pre-trained theta and we use it in the algorithm. So for every iteration, we take a sample of k pose image pairs, and then we fine tune the model for t epochs using pix-to-pix or pose warp to get the theta tilde. We take the theta tilde and we update the initialization in the direction of the fine-tuned task by a factor of epsilon. And we repeat this until we converge and get the most optimal theta, or theta star. So now for the training dataset, MetaPix uses 10 downloaded YouTube videos for pre-training and meta-training on the frames within those videos. So now we can talk about the metrics. How do we address how to measure the results of MetaPix? First, we define 3 metrics. The first one is structural similarity index, which measures the similarity between 2 images, and we want to maximize that. The second metric is PSNR, which is the point to signal noise representation, which we also want to maximize. This compares the desired signal to the level of background noise. Both of SSIM and PSNR we want to maximize. For the MSE, we want to minimize this. And if we look at both methods, for the Pix-to-Pix HD and the pose warp, we can see that MetaPix has the best values for all metrics. So we can look at MetaPix in Pix-to-Pix HD with a K size of 5 and training size of 20 epochs. SSIM and PSNR are the highest compared to pre-train and random, and MSE for MetaPix is the lowest compared to pre-train and random. So if we look at the MetaPix initialization for k equals 5 images and t equals 200 epochs, we can see that the MetaPix initialization is a little bit more clear than the pre-train initialization and closer to the ground truth. So if we compare the image results for Pix-to-Pix and pose warp, the MetaPix is consistently better than the pre-trained method. So if we look at Pix-to-Pix MetaPix, it's closer to the ground truth than pre-trained, and the same is for pose warp MetaPix. This image is closer to the ground truth than the pre-trained pose warp. And if we have an infinite number of k images, then we can safely assume that it's always going to perform better than any of these methods and be closer to the ground truth. So if we look at the results in the graphs when varying the number of images, we can see that there's an increase in k. When there's an increase in k, there's also an increase in the quality of the output. So SSIM and PSNR are the variables that we want to maximize. So these indeed are the highest. If we look at MetaPix with k equals 5 samples, it actually performs as well or better than the MetaPix with 20, where k equals 20. And we can see the same behavior in varying the number of iterations when k is constant. MetaPix with the number of iterations equal to 20 does as well. If we look at SSIM, it looks to be as well. PSNR looks to be a little bit less than MetaPix. and it looks to be a little bit less than MetaPix in the orange in the MSE as well. So from this, we can conclude that limiting the number of iterations and the number of images when using MetaPix performs just as well, or a little bit less than MetaPix with high values of iterations and images. So to conclude, we can go over three main contributions that MetaPix has given. So the first is meta learning is used in MetaPix as a personalization technique, which we went over when we say that MetaPix creates a generic model and then personalizes it to the target. And number two is meta training a generative model provides insights to what meta learning captures. Number three, image synthesis is used as a meta learning technique or task in this paper. So these are the three main contributions, and this concludes the presentation.